So Joel is going to bring this whole conversation back to the assessment and to the intelligence picture and tell you about the role of technology. He's an extraordinary man with a formidable background in this area, and it's my great pleasure to ask him and welcome him to the stage. Joel, please join us.
First of all, I'll try to, okay, is this the right range, Mrs. Aud? Better? 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 All right. You can tell I'm married. In the pantheon of personalities and types, I'm that person that people are warned not to sit next to at conferences for a lot of reasons. At one point, I actually made a comment about a speaker that caused a woman to laugh loud enough and hard enough she wet herself. She has never forgiven me to this day. My background is a bit varied. Started in engineering. Got fascinated about how engineers made decisions about projects and technology. Started studying the ethics of decision process. How do people make decisions? That led me to seminary. Not the best environment for me. Not the best for the seminary either. And I kept studying the decision process and do so to this day. My work, I run a solution shop. People come to us with problems, and I have to do this to follow my outline. And we solve those problems. My clients include the National Border Security Architecture of the nation of Kazakhstan, the Garda in Shahana, that's the police force of Ireland, the Rastafarian Church of the Caribbean. I'm dead serious. That is one of my clients. I have a witness. I hosted the first Zoom meeting for the Rastafarian Church of the Caribbean. So my work varies. I went from studying decision process to cybersecurity, and in 2006 I came back from Iraq after solving a problem there for a client, and my boss's boss's boss invited me to his office, and he said, "Great job you did in Iraq. Very impressed. You're fired. But I have a job for you. John Abrams, Creighton Abrams' son of the Abrams tank, wants you to go to the border and solve the border problem. It's about a 6-month contract." That was a decade of my life. Worked with Jason Jones. We set up the first Border Security Operations Center. We set up in 2006, late 2006, we put 14 cameras on the border, live video feed cameras, and we invited the world, come and watch. Steve McCraw at that point was working for the governor. He wasn't director of DPS at that time. Leaked the address early. In 28 days, we had 27.5 million hits. We were the #1 website on the planet for 4 days. Didn't get a lot of sleep. But we learned something. There is an intense interest on the border. Second thing we learned, if you give the ability to see something happen, people will make the right decision. They'll hit the button. And we learned some other things. If you give a camera that captures an image and people can evaluate that camera, all over the world, people will look at that image. So I could tell you when the sun went down in Japan. I could tell you when it went down in India or Europe, simply by the people that were logging on to watch. Okay? So what? How did you know? Because I would have somebody in Paris, France, Paris, Texas, Southern Illinois, Kentucky, all at the same time say, "Hey, look at this camera, there is this on this camera. And the messages came in at the same time with the same detail. Now, in my world, that's self-verifying technology. If messages from all over the planet come in at the same time saying the same thing, you don't have to check that camera. What they're saying is true on that camera. Now, where does that figure in everything else? In the decision process, most decisions are made on the basis of symbols. I know that's hard to believe. We're rational creatures. But we make decisions on the basis of symbols. Next slide. Ah, there it is. Okay. A symbol is a combination, and we will get to technology eventually, I promise. But technology is about decisions. Decisions are made on the basis of symbols. Symbols are the artifact, the thing you can taste, feel, touch, the image you see on a camera. And wrapped around that symbol is a metafact. It's not the artifact, it's the metafact. That's a piece of cloth. It's an artifact. People will not, it's an artifact. This one needs ironing. People won't do much for this. But when you take this artifact and wrap a metafact around it, it becomes a flag. People will die for a flag. Now, I'm going to tell you a decision process, and I'm going to show you where that fits in technology and where it fits on the border. And this is kind of strange. And I got to give you the preamble to that. The left believes we're evil. The right believes the left is wrong. That's the conflict in what we're doing. And because we make decisions on the basis of symbols, to get the left to change their mind is very, very hard. We won't be able to. But between the far left and the far right and us is the middle ground. We have a chance of changing the left middle more to the center. And that's how we'll win this argument. But to do that, we have to change the symbols. Most of the left's symbols are wrapped around taboos. The border is a taboo for them. Any kind of wall, any kind of impediment to free traffic. That's a symbol to them. The cages, the fences, even the men and women are all symbols. And they're taboo. Now, Victor Davis Hanson, great writer, I don't know if you follow him or not, captured this. He said, the right believes the left is wrong, the left believes the right is evil. And they base this on the taboos of evil. So how do you change a taboo? Taboos can be changed. And I will jump into my seminarian here a bit. Leviticus 11:7 talks about if you eat a pig, it's forbidden. You can't eat a pig. And there's a reason for it. You kill a pig in the desert, it rots before it's fit to eat. So they had a village over there, somebody ate the pig, and they all died. So somebody else said, we ought to write that down. So they wrote it down, and they said, we're not going to eat pig in the desert anymore. That's not going to work. Islamists came up with the same thing, probably for the same reason. Those guys over there ate the pig, they all died. And a taboo got wrapped around the artifact of a dead pig. Joel, you're going a long way from border technology here. What's going on? Okay. That's a taboo. Taboo is a metafact wrapped around that whole symbol. Okay? Polynesians had the same dead pig. They said, well, let's cook it whole and have a party. They took a taboo and turned it into a luau. If we're going to win the hearts and minds of the middle on the border, if we're going to take the middle left and maybe some of the far left and move them into our camp, we have to translate the taboos into luau's. And now you're wondering why you didn't leave earlier. And it's too late to go pee. everybody will watch you. We have to create luau's. And that's a matter of changing the taboos into luau's. Now, have I kind of got your attention and maybe you can get there? All right, I got to get the right page to look at because I can't remember half this stuff now. Actually, I was on the right page. Interesting. My wife will fuss about this later. Okay, 2 luau's coming up, as promised. Okay, found it. And I'm like this the most of my life anyway. Okay, I want to repatriate every person that comes across the border. Every one of them. And I want to do it at 0 cost to the United States. How are you going to do that? Here's what I want to do. If you come to the United States from, let's pick a country, Guatemala. You come to the United States from Guatemala, I want to repatriate you back to Guatemala. You say, well, I can't go back to Guatemala. They'll kill me. Okay, we'll repatriate you back to Colombia. Well, that's going to cost money. I want to take the money we're sending Guatemala from USAID and other agencies and pay for the repatriation. Cost the United States? 0. Why? We're already giving money to Guatemala. Let's take the money we're giving to Guatemala and pay for the repatriation. Well, they're just going to come back. Well, we'll charge Guatemala again. We're taking the money from the aid we're giving Guatemala and we're sending that person back to if not Guatemala, someplace else. What's our cost? Well, if we're already giving aid, all we're doing is moving it from one column to another. Now, and we'll add something to it. For every 1,000 people we repatriate, we take 1 diplomatic visa or 1 student visa away from Guatemala. Suddenly, it does not do any good for the dictator or politico or thug that's running the country to get rid of his people. And they're not going to be sending him money back anymore. Instead, it's going to cost him aid money. Every time we send somebody back, it costs him a little more money. But there's one exception. Instead of just sending them back, we'll let them stay here a year or even 2 years. And we'll run them to the trade school. Electrician, medical, education, plumbing, anything like that. And then when we send them back, we'll give them a micro loan to Colombia or someplace else. And we'll take that money from the aid we're giving Guatemala. Suddenly, we're sending people back to Colombia or other places, taking money from Guatemala, then we'd give them as aid, but now we're paying for someone to go to someplace else with a skill set that's valuable and the ability to set up a small business. We're going to give them a micro loan. We're going to take the money from Guatemala, train them, send them to Colombia with a micro loan so that they can set up a business. Why would we want to do that? Well, they don't stay here. And they start to build the foundation for a middle class in that country. And what that does, it helps Colombia, it helps the person we're sending back, and it builds a bridge for democracy in Colombia. By doing that, we've changed a taboo. Repatriation's a taboo to the left. Now suddenly we've made a luau out of it. We're training. We're building democracy in another country. That is, we are a famously generous people. We give money to everybody. That money, if we're giving money away, it should be money that builds democracy in other countries. And we can do that. That's changing a taboo into a luau. And by the way, I really thought about wearing a Hawaiian shirt today. I honestly did. I didn't do it. So that's one example. That's a very simple example of a policy, but it is the backbone of what we need for technology. Here's the next one. This one is even a little wilder, if that's possible. If you're an illegal alien and you come over from any place in the United States, you are not going to stay at the border, especially if you're on a wanted list, because that's the highest concentration of federal, state, and local law enforcement you're going to find on the border, is right there. So you're going to get out of there. So we've got a pretty good border stick. Not under the Biden administration, but we had a pretty good border stick. I'm going to talk to you about a border carrot. Remember my business of changing taboos into luau's? Here's how you turn the border into a carrot, not a stick. I want to build a prosperity wall, and here's how you do it. And first I have to set the context of why we have to do it. If you took all the states, counties that face the border, every county on the border, and put it in one state, it would be poorer than any other state in the Union. Poorer than Mississippi, West Virginia, any of them. It would have the lowest average income, highest rate of illiteracy, highest rate of unwed mothers, shortest average lifespan, and the greatest cumulative tax burden on the United States. Those counties on the border in one state would be a hopeless, miserable place to live. Talking about that's a taboo. Let's change it into a luau. Here's what we do. We set up green cards that only work in those counties. You come over from Mexico, you can only work in those counties. Okay, so. Secondly, if you're over the age of 65 living in those counties, or a company that employs less than 1,000 people, you're tax exempt from federal tax. So if you're over 65 and you live in one of those counties, you don't pay any federal income tax. Wait a second. The counties already cost us money. They're not paying taxes anyway. Okay, let's make it so that if you live there, you don't pay any taxes. And then the companies that are tax exempt have to take half of what their normal tax burden is, and they have to build clinics and hospitals on the Mexican side of the border, within 30 miles of the border. Now, what's that get us? That means that old geezers like me can retire to a border county, not pay income tax, have low-cost labor, low-cost health care, great service at a restaurant. I'm just telling it like it is. It means the guy coming across and the woman coming across from Mexico to work during the day in a border county can go home at night. They can live in Mexico off of very good wages in the United States. It means their kids are going to have good medical care. Their kids are going to have good school. Okay? We do this. I probably should advance the slide, please. Not yet. Yeah, go past that one. Yeah, go past that one. Go past that one. Forgot I had these things. Go past that one. Go past that one. Here we are. Within a decade, you'd be able to get in a golf cart in Brownsville and drive to San Diego. You would not lose sight of a Denny's, a Cracker Barrel, a Walmart. We could change the border into a wall of prosperity. Now, say you're a guy coming out of central Mexico, okay? And you can go leave your village and go to someplace exotic and beautiful like Cleveland or Detroit in the wintertime and work in drywall or landscaping, okay? Or you can stay within 30 miles of your hometown, go home to mom and your kids every night, and make a good living. Which are you going to do? Are you going to go to Paducah, Kentucky and freeze? Or are you going to stay down there? A wall made of prosperity could change the taboo of the border into a luau. And we can do that. Now, these are the sort of things that have to be available to us if we're going to advance, if we're going to move forward on the border. Now, with those things in place, or things like that in place, with policies like that in place, we can begin to change things. Laura gave a very generous introduction to me about technology. I'll go through some of them and things that need to be done. But first, next slide, I guess. Yeah, the awkward part. Border technology right now comes from one of two sources. It was developed for the military, or it was developed for law enforcement. Okay? Why does that matter? If it was developed for the military, it is horrendously expensive. It is probably painted green or brown. It's covered in Velcro, at least on two sides. And it takes 9 people to do what 3 people should be able to do. And the maintenance contract on it costs more than a thing. And I'm not joking about that. If it was developed for law enforcement, it's black or blue, has Velcro on 2 sides, has a forensic chain of evidence attached to it, and it has all kinds of CYA features. That's a technical term. Those 2 things cost money. We are not thinking outside of the box. And there are 2 reasons for it. DHS lacks imagination, and that, I'm being very kind when I say that. I will not say which division, but one of the major divisions in DHS is in general recognized by innovators as where ideas go to die. That's the first problem. The second is, for any idea to get into DHS, somebody has to make a lot of money on it in the Beltway. Those are the 2 big staggering problems we face. Now, next slide. We talk a lot about border. Let me talk about the border road as well as the border wall. The most dangerous part of DPS officers, or DHS officers, CBP, or ICE officers' job is getting to work. We lose more guys getting to work and getting home than any other time. And if they don't get killed there, they get killed driving on horrible roads along the border. There's a section between Laredo and up to Eagle Pass called Mines Road. I think I'm a fairly prudent driver. My wife doesn't agree, but I think I'm a fairly prudent driver. I broke the frame on a Hummer driving that road. And when you break the frame on a Hummer, everything in the Hummer comes loose. The ceiling panels, everything in the vehicle starts falling off. I was lucky. The Border Patrol vehicle I was following in the dust and dirt, they bent the frame that I had, so I had to pull around and tow them in. We were both leaving a little trail of oil as we went. We are killing Border Patrol agents by bad road. If we're going to have a border wall, by all means we should complete it. Otherwise they're going to come around the end, it's going to shape traffic. But we should include with it a border road. It will save lives. The Chinese built a great wall. And people think, well, that was to keep people out. Why didn't... It was not to keep people out. The Great Wall of China was to move troops very quickly from point to point to defend the wall. We could do the same thing with our border. But you cannot drive 90 miles an hour on the Mines Road between Laredo and Eagle Pass. You will die. Do you still live on the solid rock part or the gravel part? Am I exaggerating the road? About 4 miles about 4 miles where it comes off the gravel and hits the solid rock is where we broke the Hummer. Yep, the road left. We were driving along great. I was following Border Patrol. They went over, broke the frame. I was following the Hummer. I went over, broke the frame. Yep. We kill Border Patrol agents. Some guys live in a town where their kids can go to school, their wife can get a job, because we don't pay them enough. and they drive 90 miles every day to work and 90 miles home at night after a 12 or 16-hour shift. And they're beat to death in these vehicles. We don't have a good road on the border, and that's reality. That's the first. If I had God in my kingdom and had the power, I'd finish the wall and I'd put a decent road beside it. I'll tell you something else I'd do that doesn't sound intuitive. I'd put wildlife passages under the road, because hitting a deer is bad. Hitting a nilgai is worse. I've done both. Putting a passage under there, well, illegal aliens would come under that. Maybe they would, maybe wouldn't. But being a sensor guy, if you give me a place where I know they're going to come and concentrate and pass under, that's my happy hunting ground. I can park there and gather them as they come through, give them a number. Sign here, here's your number. Now they're going to repatriate you back to Colombia. We can do that. See why people don't like to sit next to me in conference? Next thing I would do, native planting. Next slide. Everything, these were all taken in my yard. Everything in Texas stabs, sticks, stings, or bites you. The second week in working the border in Texas, 2006, I stepped on a cactus that is euphemistically called a horse crippler. The spine went through the bottom of my boot, through the meat of my big toe, stuck through the top of my toenail. I took a pair of pliers, pulled the spine off the bottom of my boot, and walked a mile and a half back to my Jeep with blood squirting out. And I thought, I love this place. We have things we can plant on the border that I guarantee you people will not come through. And I'll give you the luau side of that. It will be a wildlife paradise. There are things that need shelter, that live in those shelters and have adapted to those shelters. If we provide them that home, they'll use it. Tarantulas? Yeah. Rattlesnakes? Yeah. Javelinas? Yeah. Wildcats? Yeah. Bobcats? Yeah. They'll all live there. Largest wildlife preserve in Asia. Anybody guess where it is? The largest, most successful wildlife preserve in Asia. It is the DMZ between North and South Korea. There is wildlife there that is nowhere else on the planet, because people don't go there because they'll step on landmines. If we let the things that are native to Texas and encourage the things that are native to Texas on the land between the river and the wall, we will have a 270-mile long wildlife preserve. That's a hell of a luau. Drawbridge. That's kind of what I'm famous for in border protection. That's what got me to go to Kazakhstan in lower Siberia and freeze. And it's a real simple idea. You take a wildlife camera and you put it in a tree or under a cactus thicket or someplace where people, you put it below the line of sight and above the line of sight, one or the other. And I've fallen out of half the trees in Texas putting these things up. And what it does, it takes a picture, day or night, it transmits the picture within 30 to 90 seconds, and you have a real life picture of somebody. Next slide. Yeah. Now, we knew it could kind of work, but I put them on Doc Vickers Ranch near Falfurrias, Texas, and got a hit at about 3 o'clock in the morning, got up, looked at it and said, I got to call Doc. So I called Doc, and he said, who the hell is this? I'm the guy that put the camera on it. What do you want? You got people at this location. How do you know? I got a picture. Call Border Patrol. So I called Border Patrol. We got people at this location on the Vickers Ranch. How do you know this? I got pictures. Where'd you get the pictures? The camera just took them and sent me the picture. What? It took a little bit to get Border Patrol to understand this process. But finally, I'll show you something kind of fascinating. First column over, the top one, that's a group of about 60 Chinese. We didn't know there were 60 Chinese when we started. The bottom picture down here, second column lower group, you can clearly see they're Chinese. When the Border Patrol showed up there, they were expecting Hispanics. No, they were all Chinese. Okay, Border Patrol agents speak pretty good Spanish. They're not much on Mandarin. And Border Patrol said, does anybody here speak English? Half the hands went up. Okay, good. That's when we knew we had cracked the code, because they were using unattended ground sensors that were developed in Vietnam. That's what Border Patrol uses. And these sensors will tell you the ground is vibrating, but they won't tell you if it's vibrating because of a deer, cow, javelina, badger, or anything else. Now, a skilled operator, allegedly, can tell you that's two men, one has a slight lisp, the other one's carrying a backpack, one's chewing Red Man. No, they're not that good. But with a wildlife camera, I can tell you what jacket he's wearing, and I can tell you if there's a guy I've seen before. The guy down here with the blue sweater tied the blue shirt and the sweater tied around him is with a known coyote. The one right above him has a telltale backpack. That guy was spotted wearing that backpack and leading two little girls with leashes around their neck. We didn't get him the first time. We didn't get him the second time. We got him the third time. When we started, the first camera I bought, well, I won't tell my wife what I paid for it, but I paid for it. It was about the size of a suitcase, ran on a tractor battery. To lug it around with you, it was almost impossible, but we put it out. They are now the size of a Coke can, cost less than $200. There are 5,000 of them on the border. They could be a lot better. They need to be modernized. They're not very smart cameras. All they see is heat and motion. Every one of you have cell phones that you can hold up, take a picture, and it puts a square on somebody's face. We should have that technology in these cameras. We don't yet. And part of that is because if it works, don't change it. We could make it a lot better. You need to know this. Texas is the largest consumer of AA batteries in North America because these cameras run, and I'm dead serious about this. These cameras run on AA batteries. And I have literally signed off a receipt for a truckload, a semi-trailer truckload of AA batteries, and then got them delivered to the border. We go through a bunch of batteries. These things can be powered by solar now. We're not doing that yet. These things are smart enough they could pick out a human from a cow or a javelina. We're not doing that yet. Helpful point if you're ever putting out one of these cameras, if you eat a meal, wash your hands after you eat. Wash before you eat, but wash your hands after you eat. Because if you touch that camera after you eat, a javelina will find it. I have more cheek-to-jowl pictures of javelinas than I want to talk about. Let's see, where am I? Next slide. Okay. That is a Harris H6HL up the top. It will carry 100 pounds, 300 miles at 40 miles an hour. It has an onboard gas turbine engine driving a dynamo that drives the electric lift engines. Right now, the cartel are using drones. We can't follow them because we are not permitted by FAA to do out of line of sight following. Oddly enough, the cartels do not obey that rule. So we can't chase them. We have to chase them in helicopters or light planes. That bird right there will deliver, what, 100 pounds, 6 kilos, 100 miles in from the border. How are you going to stop that? Now, that might be dope. It might be explosives. It might be contagion elements. It might be any number of disasters. But we can't pursue them because we can't follow line of sight. We can't fly out of line of sight. That needs to change. And it needs to change yesterday. And it doesn't have to be a law. It's just the signing of a pen. Down below it is a Huawei heavy lift drone. That bird, it costs $250,000, which is nothing in drug trade. It will lift a flat ton. It's made in China. You don't think the Chinese will supply it to the cartels for the right price? That's what's coming. And I guarantee you the cartels will have no problem stuffing one of those boxes full of people. And we can't pursue them out of the line of sight. Next slide, please. That is the current. Remember I told you all the technology on the border is derived from military and law enforcement? These were used in Afghanistan and Iraq. They're real handy, they're real good. What they do, we call it shaping traffic, because when you run them up, they stick up there and everybody looks at them and goes, we're not going over there. And so people avoid them. Why? Because they don't want to get caught. That's not the right answer. It's a good answer for stopping aircraft that are low-flying carrying cocaine. And back when we had cocaine cowboys, guys who'd overload a plane full of cocaine and fly at 60 feet over the water and just barely clear the buildings as they came in across the coast, that was a good idea. These things would look down and see it. But they don't report human trafficking, even when the human trafficking walks underneath them. Don't tell the cartels that. They already know it. Next slide. These are tethered drones. It's a kind of a conventional drone, but it's on a tether. And when you run it up, the tether goes with it to about 300 feet, which means you can see out 20 miles. How long can they stay up? They can stay up for hours or days at a time. And you don't have to have a FAA certified operator. You hit one button, the bird launches, and it stays up. And it carries cameras, and it carries thermal cameras, and it presents the image in the car with you. So you can sit in your truck in the air conditioning and pan around and watch out 20 miles with this bird. One of these birds you can pay for 1 day of operation time of a helicopter. These things ought to be they ought to be in every other vehicle on the border. They're not. I'm working a project right now with a former Border Patrol agent. He's actually technically still a Border Patrol agent, but he's seconded to the State Department, counter poaching in Africa. Because you can set one of these things up, and at a mile you can't see them, and at 100 feet you can't hear them. But they can see you 20 miles out, day or night. We need to have these on the border, and they need to be there now. Okay, this is kind of the technology I'm seeing that ought to be there. And you understand why I had to talk about decision beforehand? The aerostat, previous slide please, can I do that? This is real big for the military and for the contractor that supplies it. I actually know the company and have worked for the company that supplies these things. They're real impressive and they're a big show. They don't do much. Next slide. This is every man's tool. I can teach somebody how to run one of these in about 12 minutes. Why? When you hit the button, that clamshell pops open and the bird goes up to 300 feet. That's pretty easy. but it's not in the Pentagon's box. It's not in law enforcement's box yet, but it's getting there. They're starting to put these on squad cars. So that's a change. Now talk about decision. That blimp is kind of a sacred, we can't get rid of it, taboo, because we can't have coverage. These are luau's. Everybody gets to come to the party. I didn't tell you the best part about these guys. While they're up there looking around, they broadcast in Wi-Fi so you can look at it on your cell phone. And all your team on the ground can look at it while you're on cell phone. So now you've got God's eye view in everybody's hand. One last thing. I think, next slide. Yeah, digital exhaust. You don't want to admit it, but all you people are giving off digital exhaust. I can smell it from here. Digital exhaust is anything that happens that's secondary to what your primary function is. And I'll give you the most famous one that cost me a small fortune. You all know what Yelp is? Okay, how am I doing on time? I have no idea.
You have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, using Yelp, I can run a bot to crawl the Yelp site in a city. I can take the occupancy of a restaurant or home and garden store or whatever, and I can calibrate Yelp, and it will tell me the parking pattern in that city. It will tell me the traffic pattern in that city. It will tell me where I should have more patrol cars, more ambulances during a marathon. It'll tell me all the things I need to do to make the city working better. Now, Yelp did not do that for my benefit. Yelp did not do that for me to build a parking pattern, but I can do it by scraping off their digital exhaust. The cartels have digital exhaust. Don't tell them. I'll give you an example of using their digital exhaust. You take all the seizures in a state, guns, money, drugs, humans, and you compare it to the number of vehicles sold. Okay, so CarMax, they sell 40,000 vehicles a year in Texas. They generate about 24 seizures on the list. There's a tow yard in a small town in southern Texas, I won't tell you which one it is. They sell about 20 vehicles a year. They generated 16 vehicles on the seizure list. In my world, we call that a clue. So now I've got a tow yard that's selling vehicles. If I take all the license plates that tow yard sold and run it through a license plate database that gives me locations, I should tell you how that works. Imagine you are a bank and you have a car that has gone missing in a Scudzy neighborhood because the guy is not paying the bill. You send a tow truck out and they drive back and forth in the Scudzy neighborhood looking for that car. That's how they used to do it. Now they have side-facing license plate reader cameras that ding when they get that plate. And they record the data. There's a company, I won't say which one or how we're using it, but they have 7.3 billion images. That's with a B. And the images show license plate, location, time, and date. So I've got the license plates from that Scudzy dealership down in that small town. I can run it against this database, and I can show you every place those plates have been. From the Rio Grande Valley, up through San Antonio, Dallas, up into Kansas, over to Kansas City, over to St. Louis. I now have a mapping architecture for cartel traffic because they're leaving digital exhaust. We ought to be mining the wad out of this. This is something we need to chase hard and fast. We tried an experiment with it in 2012, something like that, maybe 10. And it worked. We located stash houses in a major metropolitan area successfully. And we were informed by the DEA, we don't do that. And we were informed by DPS, that's not how we operate. That should probably change. Next slide, please. Now, there's a Beltway Bandit saying, without bucks, no Buck Rogers. Without luau's, you don't get technology. If you can't show something that's acceptable to the left, or at least the middle left, they won't buy into it. And it has to be compelling to that they can look out and say, oh, this is a good idea, and it's the right humane thing to do. I'll tell you right now, bundling people up in aircraft and flying them up, if you take a guy from, say, Somalia or Honduras or some other, Brazil, you bundle them into an airplane and fly them to upstate New York, that's a war crime. Have you been in upstate New York in the wintertime? That is not a humane thing to do to somebody from the tropics. If we can do that, and the taboo says, well, you can't repatriate them. If we can turn the repatriation into a luau, they'll start backing the technology that helps us catch these people and get them back to a safe place. And I'll tell you how I know this. I cheat. I take an idea and I run it out on social media. And I keep tuning the idea, adjusting the knobs on it, till the people on the left like it. And it still pleases the right. That's how you get to luau's. Next slide, I think. That's it. Questions?